But your son doesn't even listen. Why would we want that energy at the table? My sister laughed, loud on purpose, like sarcasm was seasoning for the turkey. Dad chuckled, tapping his fork on the plate like this humiliation was just a casual family tradition. They didn't whisper. They didn't lower their voices. They wanted me and my son to hear. He stood there in the hallway clutching his small green dinosaur, the tail bending under his fingers, his bottom lip shaking even though he was trying to keep it still. That tiny moment, that tiny tremble, is the kind of thing a mother never forgets. Hi everyone, my name is Sienna Blake, I'm 31, and sometimes I wonder, is betrayal heavier when it's served by strangers? Or when it's served by the same blood that raised you? Dad texted me like it was a punchline. We're doing Thanksgiving with just the well-behaved kids. Yours can skip this year. Like my son was noise. Like my child was a problem. Like I should be grateful they were honest. My throat tightened, but my fingers stayed steady when I typed back. Understood. I'll cancel my card for the event. Note, my Amazon card was the one paying for their entire Thanksgiving dinner. The turkey, the desserts, the decorations, the extra chairs. All of it. But I didn't mention that detail. Seconds later, the photos started coming in. Dad holding wine. My brother making a stupid peace sign. My sister taking a filtered selfie near the centerpiece I paid for. They were laughing. Performing. Acting like the meal tasted extra sweet because my child wasn't sitting there. My son looked up at me, voice tiny, cracking right down the middle. Mom, am I bad? That single question destroyed whatever softness was left inside me. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I didn't explain. I just looked at him, and something shifted inside my chest. The kind of shift that makes a woman stop apologizing and start calculating. They thought I was still the same quiet daughter they could push around. They didn't know I had already decided. This Thanksgiving, they would choke on their own cruelty. I didn't answer his question yet, because if I spoke in that exact second, the pain in my voice would have broken the little strength he still had left. I just pulled him gently toward the kitchen, breathing slow, steady, like I needed to hold the world still before it cracked open. He climbed onto the bar stool, hugging his dinosaur like it was a shield. The heater hummed. The hallway light flickered, that flicker he always hated, and he whispered, "Can we just eat cereal? I don't want to ruin anything." My own heart sank like a stone into cold water. They were eating a feast. And my child, was asking for cereal because he thought his existence was an inconvenience. I stared at the counter where the desserts were lined up from earlier prep. Pies, cinnamon rolls, stuffing dishes, all bought under my card. All loaded in their kitchen fridge like trophies that didn't belong to them. My phone buzzed again. More photos. My sister's wine glass. Dad carving turkey. Someone in the background saying, "Wow, so peaceful this year." Peaceful because my son wasn't in the room. They didn't just insult him. They erased him. And that's when the decision clicked inside me. Sharp, quiet, final. I opened my banking app. Scrolled to my Amazon card. The one that carried the entire dinner cost, from the turkey brine kits to the floral table runner. One simple button. Freeze card. Payment method, terminated. Funds, locked. Everything they were using at that table suddenly hung in midair financially. Within 30 seconds the notifications began. Transaction declined, $138.72. Declined, $312.95. Declined, $47.16. It was like the phone was breathing urgently in my palm. At first I ignored the phone. Because in that moment, the most important thing on earth was pouring cereal into a bowl and making it look like a celebration. My son ate slowly, tiny spoon clinks, the most gentle little sounds. I smiled at him like he was a king because tonight he was. Then the phone vibrated so hard, it nearly slid across the counter. Dad was calling. Sister calling. Brother calling. All at once. All exploding. Because now, their table wasn't peaceful anymore. It was burning. I let the phone ring out, not because I was ignoring them, but because silence is a language too. Their panic was the first real consequence they'd felt in years, maybe ever. Another vibration. Then another. Then a message popped up from Dad, the exact man who laughed at my child only minutes ago. "Your card is failing. Fix this now. Everyone is waiting." Waiting for what exactly? For me to swoop in like the family servant and rescue their celebration again? My son looked up between cereal bites and whispered, "Mom, are they mad?" I bent down, brushed his hair behind his ear and said softly, "They're learning." He blinked like he was trying to understand, not the words, but the weight beneath them. The next notification wasn't a decline alert. It was a photo. My sister, standing at the register holding a stack of dessert boxes. Eyes wide, mouth twisted in embarrassment. Cashier staring. People behind her looking annoyed. And her text underneath. "Are you serious? Unfreeze the card. We're not playing." Not playing. As if making my child feel unwanted was a game. As if emotional damage was entertainment. I wiped the counter slowly, the rhythm calming, controlled, while my son reached for the dinosaur tail again like he needed grounding. He didn't cry anymore. He was just quiet, the kind of quiet that comes from being taught his value by cruelty. Then Dad called again, but this time he didn't wait for me to answer. The voicemail came instantly. "Sienna, your sister is standing here like a fool. People are staring. Fix your mess and stop being dramatic for once in your life." My mess. Not their cruelty. Not their exclusion. Not their dismissal of a child. My mess. I finally picked up the phone on the next call, not to speak, but to let the sound of silence travel across the line. Dad's voice came in hot, sharp, demanding. "Sienna, fix this. Right now." I didn't respond immediately, I just let him breathe in his own panic. Then calmly, softly, I said, "You told me we weren't invited. So financially we're not there." And before he could form another insult, I tapped the red button and ended the call. The moment I hung up, there was a silence so sharp it felt like glass in the air. My son was halfway done with his cereal now, the tiny dinosaur tucked under his arm like a friend who stood guard. His breathing finally steadied. His shoulders weren't tight anymore. Meanwhile, my phone exploded again. "Sister, unfreeze it now. The Pius is not approving anything." "Brother, are you trying to embarrass us?" "Dad, don't make this worse." They still didn't get it. Their version of worse was inconvenience. My version of worse was a child believing he's unworthy. I sat with my son, not rushing this moment, because I knew they were rushing everywhere. In their world, pride mattered more than kindness. And tonight, pride was all they had left. Another message came in, but this one made me stop breathing for a second. It was a recording. I played it. Restaurant noise. Murmurs. Then my brother's angry voice. "Well, someone better pay. Sienna owes us for this." Owes. Just the way he said it, like I was property. Like I existed as a wallet. Like my son's tears were nothing compared to their inconvenience. I leaned back against the cabinet. The kitchen light flickered, softer this time, like even electricity was aware something had shifted tonight. My son licked the last bit of milk from his spoon and whispered, "Mom, do you think Grandpa hates me?" His voice was so sincere, so small, like he was holding a question too big for his tiny chest. I closed my eyes for 1 second, letting the ache move through my lungs, but when I opened them, the ache had turned into something else. Clarity. "That's not your burden," I whispered back. "It's theirs." He nodded, slowly, then leaned his head on my arm. That little gesture, that tiny trust, was the moment my revenge found its real purpose. This wasn't about teaching them a lesson to humiliate them. This was about showing him, my son, that love defends. It doesn't abandon. It doesn't bow. It doesn't prove itself to people who choose cruelty. I looked at the screen, at all the missed calls, all the frantic messages. And then I typed back, not to them but to myself. They want a battle? Then they'll get a reckoning. Because tonight wasn't even the peak. This was just the first cut of the blade. I hit send like I was closing a door. The words sat on my screen and shimmered, small and dangerous. They want a battle? Then they'll get a reckoning. I didn't draft a manifesto. I didn't shout from the rooftops. I made quiet moves. Surgical, precise. The way you protect a child without making a spectacle. First, I called the card company's fraud line. Calm voice. Measured facts. I reported suspicious, unusual activity and requested an immediate temporary block pending verification. Paperwork was filed. A claim number blinked across my screen like a little beacon. Then I called the florist and rescheduled the delivery. The centerpiece that would have sat like proof of my attendance. to arrive at an address 2 neighborhoods over, in a cafe where my small army of single moms met every Thursday. I changed the billing email to one they didn't control. I rerouted receipts. I canceled the catering tip and redirected it to a soup kitchen downtown. I sent the leftover pies to the shelter where my friend works. The same shelter where my mother had once lined up for help years ago when things were rough. Everything small and invisible to them, but everything monumental for the people receiving it. My son watched me, eyes big and steady, like he understood more than I gave him credit for. He asked once, "Are you going to make them sad on purpose?" "No," I said. "I'm going to make them see themselves. That's different." He nodded and then, without ceremony, he placed his dinosaur on the windowsill, the green toy catching the streetlight like a little sentinel. That dinosaur became our motif that night. Stubborn, fierce, tiny but watchful. I liked the symbolism. A fierce guardian no one took seriously until it mattered. As messages kept coming, new demands, guilt-laced pleas, performative apologies, I let them pile. I didn't answer the calls that begged and barked. Instead, I answered the people I trusted. My neighbor who could pick up the extra dessert for the shelter, the single mom who needed winter coats, the friend who agreed to post an anonymous note about community dinner donations. Somewhere between redirecting money and sending gifts, I updated my social accounts. Not a call-out, not a rant, just a soft, ambiguous photo of a half-set table, a cereal bowl beside a folded napkin captioned, "Food is love. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." If they saw it, they would feel a prickle. If they didn't, the people who needed dinner would. At 8:24 p.m., my phone lit up with a strange new kind of message. Not a demand, not a performance, but a picture from an unknown number. My sister, eyes rimmed red, sitting at the now empty table, the leftover turkey under a heat lamp, the centerpiece wilting. No filters. No laughs. Just the raw, hollow look of a thing that had been expected to feel like victory but tasted like ash. I put the phone down and my son climbed into my lap. He pressed the dinosaur into my palm and said with a seriousness beyond his years, "We did the right thing, Mommy." And in the quiet that followed, the heater ticking, the light flicker steady, I felt something else settle. The knowledge that kindness redirected was louder than any sarcastic laugh. I tucked him into bed early that night, not because he was tired but because his small body finally felt safe again. He curled under the blanket and whispered, "Do you think tomorrow will feel nicer?" I kissed his forehead and said, "Tomorrow is ours." He closed his eyes without fear for the first time that day. When I stepped back into the living room, the phone lit up again. This time Dad didn't bother with calls. He finally sent a text that wasn't arrogant. It was a single line. "We need to talk." Not "fix this." Not "unfreeze your card." Not "you made a mess." "We need to talk." Meaning, now they were worried about losing me, not just the money. I didn't reply. Instead, I made chamomile tea and sat down on the couch. And for the first time that night, I allowed myself to breathe, really breathe. The quiet creaks in the house felt like the walls exhaling with me. Another message came in, from Mom. She had stayed quiet through all of this. Until now. "Why would you humiliate your family on Thanksgiving?" I stared at that sentence for a long moment, because there's always one person who flips the blame back on the quiet girl. I typed slowly, without venom, without shaking hands. I didn't humiliate anyone. I just stopped funding people who humiliate children. I hit send. No emojis. No over-explanation. No performance. Her reply didn't come. Silence. The kind that says a truth landed and can't be unraveled. Then, like a final blow, my sister's husband texted me from his number. He never texts me ever. "The restaurant is closing. We can't pay the balance." Dad is furious. There was, finally, the real problem. Not my son's feelings. Not the cruelty. Not the humiliation. Money. Their entire meltdown, every insult and voicemail, was never about inclusion, respect, or family. It was about the fact that without me, the feast fell apart. I placed the phone screen down and looked at the dinosaur still on the windowsill, tiny green silhouette against the streetlight, like a reminder that this wasn't petty revenge. This was protection. This was reclaiming value. And they still hadn't realized, I hadn't even touched the most devastating part yet. The part that would hit them where it truly hurt. Not their plates but their pride. I barely slept, not because of regret but because a certain kind of clarity sits like steel inside the chest. Revenge wasn't the goal. Correction was. When the house was quiet, I made coffee, opened my laptop, and began the real work. Not loud anger but quiet precision. I wrote 3 messages. One to the restaurant manager. Polite, factual. Explaining the card freeze was intentional. One to the small neighborhood charity we donated to before. And one public post. Not a rant, just an image and a sentence. The manager replied fast. He wasn't angry, he sounded relieved someone finally told him the truth. He admitted how humiliating it is when families shout at staff because a card fails. I didn't apologize, I offered a clear path. Hold service. If they pay themselves, fine. If not, redirect leftovers to the shelter. I'll coordinate pickup. He paused, then agreed. Not to shame them, but to let the consequences sit exactly where they deserve to sit. Around noon, the shelter people arrived. Winter coats, worn gloves, grateful hands. The centerpiece, the one they thought was for their perfect family table, looked more honest sitting inside that shelter hall than it ever could have on their Instagram stories. Then I posted my image. Not them. Not the restaurant. Not the table. Just the dinosaur on our windowsill beside a cardboard tray of pies. Captioned. We ate anyway. Food is love. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. No hashtags. No blame. No performance. Within 1 hour, screenshots of that photo were already circulating in the family group chat. My cousin, the one who notices everything, wrote under my sister's filtered Thanksgiving selfie. Is this the table we talked about? That was all it took. The whole tone shifted. Then it arrived, the message I expected from the restaurant manager. Ma'am, the charity accepted the balance. Meaning, the feast had been transferred into real nourishment, not status. They didn't lose money. They lost face. I closed my laptop to check on my son, building a pillow fort for his dinosaur. Unbothered, safe. He handed the toy to me and asked softly, "Did they come, Mommy?" "Yes." He smiled, small sure. Then my phone buzzed again, a voice note from my sister, trembling. "Thana. And in that tiny pause, the entire architecture of their cruelty began to shake. I didn't play the voicemail yet. I let it sit, like a sealed envelope holding the exact temperature of their regret. Instead, I lit one single candle on the kitchen counter, cinnamon-scented, and the flame reflected inside the dinosaur's tiny glossy eye, like the universe had shrunk all the meaning down into one small green witness. My son sat beside me quietly, chin on his hands, watching the flame dance. "You think they're sorry?" he whispered. I said softly, people only apologize when they finally see themselves. I finally tapped the play button. My sister's voice cracked mid-sentence. "Thana, I swear, I didn't realize how bad it was. We were wrong." No excuses. No sarcasm. No performance. Just the unfiltered realization that cruelty had a cost, and that cost wasn't money. It was dignity. It was the loss of the right to pretend they were better. I didn't reply. I didn't scold. I didn't reopen the wound. I placed the dinosaur in my son's hand and whispered, "Tonight we won. Not because we hurt them, but because we didn't let them hurt you." He smiled, small, quiet, sure. Justice isn't loud. Justice is a child sleeping peacefully.